In the dim glow of her desk lamp, Evelyn stared at the open laptop before her. The late hour cast a stillness over the room, broken only by the faint hum of the city outside her apartment window. It was the type of quiet that left her alone with her thoughts. Thoughts she had tried to suppress for weeks. She had always prided herself on being in control, but now her life felt like it was spinning out of her grasp. Evelyn was in her mid-30s, a successful attorney known for her sharp mind and unyielding determination. Her career had been her focus for years, often at the expense of her personal life. It wasn't that she didn't want intimacy or connection. She simply hadn't found a way to balance it with the demands of her work. Until recently, that hadn't bothered her much. But lately, something had shifted inside her, stirring desires she had long ignored. The change began a few months ago when she took on a high-profile case that brought her into contact with Damien, a consultant hired by her firm to assist with financial forensics. Damien was everything Evelyn wasn't: carefree, charismatic, and seemingly untouched by the weight of the world. From the moment they met, there was an undeniable spark between them, a chemistry that went beyond professional camaraderie. At first, Evelyn dismissed it as harmless attraction. She was too disciplined to let a fleeting crush interfere with her work. But the more time they spent together, the more she found herself drawn to him. Damien had a way of making her feel seen, as though he understood the parts of her she kept hidden from the world. He listened to her, really listened, and that made her feel special in a way she hadn't in years. It started innocently enough. They'd grab coffee after meetings or linger a little too long in the hallway, chatting about everything except work. Then one evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, they ended up at a bar near the office. One drink turned into several, and before Evelyn knew it, they were walking side by side through the city streets, talking about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. That night, under the cover of darkness and the anonymity of the city, Evelyn felt something inside her begin to crack. As they stood on the steps of her apartment building, she knew she should say goodnight and go inside. But when Damien leaned in, his breath warm against her cheek, she didn't pull away. The kiss that followed was electric, awakening feelings she had buried deep within herself. From that moment, there was no going back. Their affair became a secret they both cherished and feared. They were careful, always meeting in places where they wouldn't be recognized, always ensuring their professional lives remained untarnished by their personal indiscretions. But the guilt gnawed at Evelyn. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Damien was married, and though his relationship with his wife was strained, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing a line she'd never be able to uncross. The duality of her life began to take its toll. By day, she was the fierce attorney, respected and admired. By night, she was a woman consumed by passion and desire, living for stolen moments with a man she could never truly have. The secrecy weighed on her, yet she couldn't bring herself to end it. Damien had become her escape, the one place where she could let down her guard and simply be. But as the weeks passed, the line between her personal and professional life began to blur. Evelyn found herself distracted at work, her thoughts drifting to Damien even in the middle of important meetings. Her colleagues noticed the change in her, though no one dared to confront her about it. She was still performing at a high level, but the cracks were starting to show. It all came to a head one evening when Evelyn's boss, Laura, asked to speak with her privately. Laura was a formidable woman, a partner at the firm who had mentored Evelyn for years. She was someone Evelyn admired and respected, and the idea of disappointing her filled Evelyn with dread. As she sat across from Laura in her office, Evelyn could feel the weight of her secret pressing down on her. Laura studied her for a long moment before speaking, her voice calm but laced with concern. "Evelyn, you've been off your game lately. I don't know what's going on with you, but it's affecting your work. You need to get it together, whatever it is." Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. "I'm sorry, Laura. I've just been dealing with some personal issues. It won't happen again." Laura's gaze softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. "We all have personal issues, Evelyn, but you're one of the best attorneys here, and I need you at the top of your game. Whatever it is, you need to figure it out." As Evelyn left Laura's office, the full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She couldn't keep living this double life. It was tearing her apart, and now it was starting to impact the one thing she had always been able to rely on, her career. That night she met Damien at their usual spot, a discreet hotel on the edge of the city. She had planned to end things, to finally put a stop to the affair that had consumed her life. But when she saw him, all her resolve melted away. They made love with an intensity that left her breathless, and as they lay tangled in the sheets afterward, she felt a deep, aching sadness settle in her chest. Damien sensed it too. He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "What's wrong, Evelyn?" She hesitated, the words she needed to say catching in her throat. "I can't keep doing this, Damien. It's tearing me apart." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of understanding and pain. "I know. I've been thinking the same thing." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Evelyn knew what she had to do, but the thought of walking away from Damien felt like tearing out a piece of her soul. Yet, she couldn't deny the reality any longer. Their affair was built on lies and secrecy, and it was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. As they dressed in silence, the air between them was thick with finality. There would be no more stolen moments, no more whispered confessions in the dark. When Damien kissed her goodbye at the door, it was with a tenderness that made her heart ache, and then he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts and the crushing weight of her decision. The days that followed were some of the hardest of Evelyn's life. She threw herself into her work, trying to drown out the pain with long hours and endless tasks. But at night, when the world was quiet and there was no one around to distract her, the loneliness crept in, filling the spaces Damien had once occupied. Evelyn knew she had made the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier. The guilt and shame she felt were like twin shadows, following her everywhere she went. She had hurt people, Damien's wife, herself, and now she had to live with the consequences. Weeks passed, and slowly life began to return to a semblance of normalcy. Evelyn was regaining her focus at work, her sharpness returning as she buried herself in her cases. But the emptiness remained, a constant reminder of what she had lost. Then one day, as she was leaving the office, she received a text from Damien. It was brief, just a few words. "I miss you. Can we talk?" Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the message. Part of her wanted to delete it, to pretend she hadn't seen it. But another part of her, the part that still ached for him, wanted to reply. Evelyn stood there, her thumb hovering over the screen, torn between the life she had chosen and the love she couldn't forget. She knew that responding would only lead to more heartache, more pain. But the pull was strong, stronger than she wanted to admit. In the end, she slipped her phone back into her bag without replying. As she walked out into the night, she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in months, she felt like she was taking control of her life again. But as she made her way through the crowded streets, Evelyn couldn't help but wonder if she would ever truly be free of the choices she had made. The desire, the guilt, the longing. They were all a part of her now, woven into the fabric of her being, and no matter how far she ran, she knew she would always carry them with her, a reminder of the woman she had become and the price she had paid for following her heart. Evelyn's decision to cut ties with Damien didn't ease her internal struggle as much as she had hoped. Her work life returned to its regular pace, but the nagging emptiness in her personal life became more pronounced. It was as if she had severed the only connection that had brought color to her otherwise monochrome existence. She started to question herself, her choices, and her motivations. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, Evelyn found herself in a small cafe, nursing a cup of coffee. The familiar hum of people around her was oddly comforting. As she stared out the window, watching the city bustle by, she couldn't help but reflect on how her life had spiraled out of control. It wasn't just the affair with Damien. It was the culmination of years of loneliness and unmet emotional needs. She had devoted herself to her career, thinking that success would fill the void, but it hadn't. Instead, it had driven her to seek fulfillment in the arms of a married man. The realization was sobering. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone vibrating on the table. She glanced down to see a message from her sister, Emily. They hadn't spoken much in recent months, mainly because Evelyn had been too wrapped up in her own life to maintain her usual relationships. The message was simple. "Hey, I'm in town. Want to catch up?" Evelyn hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready to face her sister, who had always been the one person she could talk to about anything. But something in her knew she needed this, needed to reconnect with the people who had been there for her before her life had become so complicated. "Sure," she replied. "How about tonight?" They agreed to meet at a small wine bar they used to frequent when Emily lived in the city. As Evelyn walked into the bar that evening, she spotted Emily immediately. Her sister hadn't changed much, still the vibrant, confident woman who seemed to have everything figured out. "Evelyn!" Emily exclaimed, pulling her into a warm hug. "It's been too long." Evelyn smiled, the warmth of her sister's embrace easing some of the tension she had been carrying. "I know. I've been awful at keeping in touch. How have you been?" They ordered a bottle of wine and settled into a cozy corner of the bar. As they talked, Evelyn found herself opening up more than she had in months. She talked about work, the pressures she felt, and the loneliness that had driven her to make some questionable decisions. Emily listened patiently, her expression a mix of concern and understanding. Finally, Evelyn couldn't hold it in any longer. "I did something terrible, Em," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I had an affair with a married man." Emily's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She waited for Evelyn to continue. "I don't know why I did it," Evelyn said, tears welling up in her eyes. "I mean, I do know, because I was lonely and feeling empty, but it was so wrong. And now I'm left with this guilt that I can't shake." Emily reached across the table, taking Evelyn's hand in hers. "Evelyn, we all make mistakes. What matters is how you move forward from them." Evelyn nodded, but the tears continued to fall. "I've cut things off with him, but I still feel like I've lost a part of myself. I don't know how to find my way back." Emily squeezed her hand. "It's going to take time, but you'll get through this. You've always been strong, even when you didn't feel like it. Maybe this is a chance for you to figure out what you really want in life, beyond your career." Evelyn looked at her sister, grateful for her support, but also realizing the truth in her words. She had been so focused on her career that she had lost sight of what truly mattered to her: connection, love, and a sense of purpose beyond work. Maybe it was time to start figuring out what that looked like. The weeks that followed were a period of introspection for Evelyn. She continued to see her therapist, delving deeper into the underlying issues that had driven her to make the choices she had. She also began to rebuild her relationships with the people she had distanced herself from, including her sister. Slowly but surely, she started to feel more grounded, more in touch with who she was and what she wanted out of life. She also made changes at work. She set boundaries, ensuring she didn't let her career consume her every waking moment. She even took a step back from some of her more high-pressure cases, delegating responsibilities to others in her firm. It was a difficult adjustment, but it was necessary for her own well-being. Evelyn still thought about Damien from time to time, especially when she passed places where they had spent time together. But the pain of their affair began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. She had made a mistake, one that had caused pain for herself and others, but she was determined not to let it define her. One afternoon, as she was leaving the office, she received a call from Damien. She hadn't heard from him since their last encounter, and seeing his name on her phone screen sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello?" "Evelyn." Damien's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I know we haven't spoken in a while, but I wanted to see how you were doing." Evelyn took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I'm doing better, Damien. How about you?" "I'm doing okay," he replied. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I know things got complicated and I never wanted to hurt you, or anyone else." Evelyn appreciated his words, but she knew that closure wouldn't come from another conversation with Damien. "Thank you, Damien. I think we both made mistakes, but we've learned from them. I wish you the best." There was a pause on the other end before Damien spoke again. "I wish you the best too, Evelyn. Take care." As she ended the call, Evelyn felt a sense of finality. This chapter of her life was over, and while it had been painful, it had also been a turning point. She had come to understand herself better, to recognize her own needs and desires, and to take responsibility for her actions. In the months that followed, Evelyn continued to focus on healing and growth. She took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even began to explore the possibility of finding love again, this time in a healthy and honest way. It wasn't easy, and there were still days when she struggled with guilt and regret, but she was moving forward, one step at a time. Evelyn knew she wasn't perfect, but she was learning to accept her imperfections, to forgive herself for her past mistakes, and to build a future that aligned with her values. The experience had changed her, but it had also made her stronger, more resilient, and more determined to live a life of authenticity and integrity. As she sat in that same cafe one evening, sipping her coffee and watching the world go by, Evelyn realized that she had come full circle. She had faced her demons, confronted her mistakes, and emerged on the other side with a renewed sense of self. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been necessary, a path to self-discovery that had led her to where she was now. And as she looked out at the city streets, she felt a sense of peace, knowing that she was exactly where she needed to be.